Hello, good now to you, and welcome to another scintillating episode of BetaCodex Live. My name is Ryan Erickson. In this form from Red 42 as a collaborative and contributing artist, and with me, as always, Mr. Niels Flagging. Hello, and good now to you.
Hello, Ryan. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be talking with you about social density today.
Yeah, social density. So you and I can talk about that term all we want, but some folks out there in maybe even in the beta world, but outside that don't necessarily know what is meant by that term. So when you use the term, what does it mean and when do you invoke it?
By the way, now that you mentioned it, I'm not quite sure if I invented the term or if I got it somewhere. I'm not quite sure.
I have looked up. I've looked it up a
Yes.
couple places. I think I did find it. I don't know if I found it in Scholar, but there's something on Psychology Today that I found on. I'm like,
All
it
right.
kind of sounded like what I think you're gonna say. I can pull up the article
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
But did you find that expression, social density? Was it
I
somewhere?
I found the literal expression, social density.
Okay. Because I wasn't quite sure. I used it. Oh yeah, I see something here when I look for it searching. Okay, good. Yeah, that's good. So it's not an invention of mine. Uh, what
Damn
what
it!
derivative? No, there are so many words we can still create, but I think it was because we look for an alternative to other terms like peer pressure and so on. Yeah, that's how we came up with
Mhm.
it. Yeah,
Well,
social density. Yes.
what does it mean? I pretend that I know nothing about social density and you go start talking about it. What are you talking about, Niels?
It's a good question. So what's the opposite of social density? Let's check this out first. What was the opposite?
Isolation, possibly, or
Oh, that's a nice one. I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming. Very good. Yes.
um,
It's true.
social dissipation. What's the opposite of density? Looseness, possibly.
Yeah, that's what I would.
Tightness.
Yeah, social looseness or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and social density is it is of course one of the sources of peer pressure, right? Related to peer pressure. Without social density,
Yeah.
no peer pressure. Yeah.
Well, this is okay. So, do you want to go farther with that, or dive into peer pressure?
No, one more thing that comes to mind, and this is a creation, a linguistic creation of mine, I'm proud to say, is working with each other for each other as part of the topic today as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Working with each other for each other, that is related to social density. Without working with each other for each other, instead of working in parallel, in isolation, as you said brilliantly,
Yeah.
that's the opposite, in isolation. Working in parallel or working with each other for each other, peer pressure, social density, and so on. And I think social density is a very nice way to
It,
put those things, to
it,
sum it
it,
up.
yeah, and I think that because when you say peer pressure, and bring that in, I know from my history again coming up through the educational system here in the States,
Mm.
peer pressure is not a good, like, peer pressure is used to get kids to do drugs and to get kids
What?
to smoke. Well, that term is invoked as peer pressure, is like, hey, it's cool to smoke, it's cool to do this, or oh, you're not on the football team or you're not on the track team, well, you got to be cool to be that. And that's, I'm sending pressure to you as your peer, and to try and, oh, surprise, coerce you into something, right?
Yeah, it's
That
interesting that sociologically neutral term like peer pressure is abused or is used in such a, let's say,
perverted.
yeah, perverted or brutally negative way.
Negative way.
It's interesting. Yes, but I have heard this kind of emphasis before, the negative emphasis of peer pressure. Oh,
Mm.
that's something bad. Boss pressure, nobody criticizes that really, but peer pressure is supposedly always about something negative, right? Uh,
Yeah.
So okay, yeah, okay. That's one of the reasons why I thought, okay, what's behind this phenomenon? How can we describe how beta organizations are different socially? How can we describe it without using the term peer pressure? In fact, yeah, I have heard that simplistic negative framing of peer pressure before.
It's a different understanding and a different frame in a different context. So the other thing you mentioned, what's the opposite of density? Well, what's the opposite of a peer?
Oh, oh, the opposite of a peer is power over, bosses, underlings, and so on. Hierarchical relationships, and peers strictly power with, in the words of Mary Parker Follett. Yeah. So yeah, I think peer pressure. Yeah, peer pressure means among people who are on eye level, and so yeah, with colleagues. Collegiality is another good term.
Oh, this is wonderful. So the other side of this, and thinking about collegiality, power with, and again these terms of art within the BetaCodex, that okay, peer pressure versus peer isolation. Okay, functional divisions and people not talking to each other. That makes sense.
Yes.
In the opposite of
silos, of course, indicate this kind of social looseness or sloppiness as well.
And blindness in some ways, I think, too.
Blindness. Interesting. What do you mean?
That I am here in my own silo. I can't see outside of it. I am the social
blindsidedness, and yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm blinded to the other thing. The other thought is like, what's the opposite of peer? What's managerial pressure? Right. So as
hierarchical pressure. Yeah. Of course. I mean, that's the most common thing.
And that's
sadly do not think of it as so negative, but it is of course very negative. Micromanagement is very negative. I think some people might, by the way, confuse let's say some bullshit concepts with social density. So let's clarify that as well. Consent has nothing to do with social density. Consent, which is, if nobody here votes against it, it is accepted. That is bloody authoritarianism, Stalinism, fascist. Consent is a really bad idea.
Well,
like it inspires so much fear in everybody that nobody will argue against something. So then we have consent, which supposedly is almost as good as consensus, which it is nothing similar.
Because it pushes down. Oh, I have to. What am I consenting to? To whom am I consenting? And that if what's the opposite of consent is dissent, right? If I dissent,
it's a necessary thing to reach integration. What Mary Parker Follett talks about as integration. You have to have dissent. That's why we always say we don't have to agree with each other. I mean, certainly we agree a lot too much on this. In this little podcast thingy that we have, but we try to avoid all this agreement. We try to be in dissent because only then can we reach integration. Arrive at a conclusion that is better than what any of us individually could have come up with. So dissent is necessary. It's not a negative thing. Consent is usually proposed and lauded by people who have a certain conflict aversion, which is a characteristic. Okay, yeah, some people do not like conflict so much. I love it. I followed apparently.
I would never imagine that.
It's necessary to engage in a certain amount of disagreement and constructive conflict. Of course, I'm talking about. So yeah, consent is totally fatal. By the way, the consent method. Some of you might have heard about it, others not. If you haven't never heard about it, you're lucky because it's utter bullshit. If you have
the consent method you're talking about,
oh yeah, it's in sociocracy and holacracy. It's one of the most important mechanisms. Consent. You have all these meetings, and it's always by consent, which is hilariously offensive, I think, because consent or the absence of disagreement with something would only make sense in an environment that is free of fear. Now, in command and control organizations are full of fear. It's actually management by fear, if you
because I'm afraid of the Consequence is another way
I'm
to
never
use
afraid to
it.
speak up in an environment like that, when nobody's ever afraid to speak up and disagree with something. You could argue that consent would be a viable method. It would be superfluous usually, because you would just have discourse, And also, consent assumes that everybody who's there in a certain meeting is relevant to the topic. That's also the consent method is horribly alpha, really, because it assumes
Yeah.
that everybody shall vote all the time. It's really Soviet Stalinist committee bullshit.
Committees upon committees upon committees, and that's like the dark chamber rooms like that.
Yes, the echo chamber
And the chamber of
fear.
secrets, as we say in Harry Potter land. The other thing is that as each word has its context and meaning in the context, I think
Mhm.
context between private personal relationships of an intimate nature, there's a whole different quality of consent that we're talking
Oh yeah,
about
yeah. No, we're talking about
versus consent in a
yes, yes,
business forum. We're doing
yes,
business together. Oh, I
sure,
consent to your
yes.
brain
We're
dead
talking
idea because I
about
don't want
consent as a
conflict.
concept in organizations and in work environment. Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, of course. There's another way that this term is used in
Yeah.
America in English.
And I think in the context of social density, that the idea of consent, it does not connect you to one another. I think in a business environment, because it kind of says, oh, I consent, but I'm still kind of, I might disagree with you, but okay, I'll go along
That's the
with
fear
the
thing. Yes, I mean that's why in beta we argue that decisions are less important than agreements. You want to create agreements. Agreement. Now, getting back to Mary Parker Follett's concept of integration, you can usually only reach agreement if you come up with a solution that will integrate different positions, different starting ideas to begin with. So you need to integrate to come up with a better integrating alternative to the initial positions, to come up with an agreement. So agreements are totally essential to beta. Now, in beta, you don't have to have agreement among everybody, but people with mastery or people who have to consult with each other, they should be in agreement, relevant people to the problem, yeah, and not as in holacracy, sociocracy, all these hilarious concepts,
or
horribly flawed concept, I would say.
or this connected circle has authority to decide this, and they
Yes,
decide this.
yes, and circles are
And,
committees. I mean, there's all those circles. It's just another word for committees.
yeah, it's
That's really the thing.
not about literal circles. Now, I had a thought here as you talked about, okay, consent, and it's not integration. It's like consent leads to uniformity,
It means
right?
acceptance. I accept.
Well, I accept regardless. I'm separate from you. I consent, and that then we have again uniformity, not unity, because
To me, the word consenting.
unity.
Yeah.
Well, no. The thought I was going to say is that if unity is the goal, that unity comes through integration. Right? I think
Yes, and
that's the
uniformity
pathway.
comes through consent.
Perfect. That's what
Consent
I was trying to
is
get to.
something like I give up. I don't give a shit. That's consent.
Hmm.
I might be
Yeah.
against what you're talking about, but I don't give a shit. I don't care enough to counter argue because you're just assholes.
Yeah. And this.
Or as Ricky Gervais would say, you're fucking cunts.
Ooh.
I have to
Wow.
use. I have to swear a little. We have to.
You have
We
to
have
say
to
it's
be
Ricky Gervais
provocative
saying
here. We have to be provocative and really nasty here. That's what I mean. Ricky Gervais uses the term "cunt" all the time in his work, right?
well,
So
and from watching The Boys,
and the
that
boys
The
exactly.
Boys comes up a
So
lot.
so yes, I had to try how it feels. You silly cunts.
Sh-
I will not
you're
openly disagree, but internally, I
you're
disagree totally with you.
yeah,
MS.
and I don't, and the
Horrible.
other side, I don't give a shit. I don't give a
Exactly.
shit.
Oh, I don't give a shit
And
because
and
I'm
you
afraid
and
of you.
you
That's why I will not speak up because I'm afraid
and
of
I'm
you.
not.
And you can punish
Oh,
me for disagreeing, so I will not speak up. All that is allowed in consent. Consent is utter bullshit. Can we close it? We want
I'm
social
ready to.
density. That's the opposite of consent.
and so density also talks about integration, and then if you and I are not in agreement, I dissent with this, and we search towards, okay, we're going to
Okay.
have, well, yeah, we're going to have conversation
Yeah.
and dialogue, and discourse about where our disagreements lie, and approach integration, approach unity, and that when we're talking about integration, that's dense. That's we are
Yes.
weaving.
When we
We are weaving
engage,
together.
when we discuss, when we dare to disagree, that's social density. Or those are characteristics of social density. When we
Yeah.
argue with each other, when we engage in serious conversation and discourse, yeah, that's a characteristic of disagreement. Not when we send each other emails correcting each other. Ah, you did this. You did these 3 things wrong. These are my top 3 things today of stuff that you fucked up yesterday. That's not social density, right? Social density is to
Well, because it does that you're wrong, and you're
yes,
yeah, I don't care.
blaming,
It's not it's
blaming.
not
Oh,
like
Fred, he's such a prick, right? Fred, he's such an. I mean, so blaming people is not social density. It is socially interesting, but it's not social density.
well, in this and social density on social media is a joke
Yes,
too,
yeah. Social
and
media is not
and
so social, right? Yeah.
it's anti-social media, and it's a game, and I know you have fun on social media. I know you do.
Me, yes, but I
I,
think it's an incredibly risky game. I'm often thinking of getting out of it, but I can't because I think it's
hmm,
we have to produce art on social media. Maybe we talked
yeah,
about this in another episode. I felt an obligation as a citizen to engage in social media to provoke
yeah.
dissent. Yes,
Well,
to make people think if
just
they want to, if they want to.
well, to seek integration versus seeking, isolation,
Yes.
and yeah, what did I say the opposite was? But
But
um,
let's get back to social density.
yeah, I also want to get to you brought the essays on beta book
Yes.
with the idea
There's an
of bringing
article on
some.
social density in this book.
Yes, 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 yes.
Look at me.
You can see it. You can see it. Pardon me. What have I read the article? It's been a long time since I've read that book. So
Yes, yes. It
isn't
came out
this
in
is not the toxic
2020.
power? This is not the toxic power of they, is it?
What do you mean?
Well, that's an article you wrote, the toxic power of they.
Yes, yes, yes. The article, it's called Social Density, the Key to Self-Organization. Yeah. Very similar to our topic today. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and why? Again, I have my theory and opinion about why social density is key to self-organization, because self-organization, it asks something from you. Okay, that
Yes.
that
Like democracy.
if in democracy, exactly, it asks me to have dissent with you. It asks it demands this conversation that is uncomfortable, so that to have a bonded group that is not dependent, that
Yes.
if I'm dependent on anyone else outside of this group to come to agreement on something, that is not dense. That takes me away from you. Oh, I need some argument from authority to bring in here to make my point to you, and that's not self-organization. That's organizing according to some other de- a paternalistic kind of force that I'm dependent on,
Yes. I
per
mean,
se.
now that you're bringing up self-organization, let's clarify that. I think more often than not, or very often, self-organization is understood as something individual. I'm self-organized. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Yeah.
Self-managed, self-organized. That's
Yes. Self-management. I hate
the
that term. Of course, many of our peers use the term self-management. It's not. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's an oxymoron. Yeah. Self-management.
who
It's a
else is
nonsense term. It's
yeah.
bogus.
Uh,
But okay, some colleagues use that term in lieu of self-organization. But then again, self-organization, it conveys this thing of I do whatever the fuck I want, which it is not. Self-organization in our mind is something that is similar to freedom. I can only have we can only have freedom if I accept that your freedom and mine might restrict each other's.
and
Uh,
this
options
comes
of
to account.
behavior. Yeah, something that Donald Trump doesn't understand, for example. So freedom is a very important concept. Self-organization, very important concept. Social density conveys, I hope, this concept that we have to be with each other, for each other, in the mode of belonging, of
Well,
agreeing, of being in,
I,
being in sync and creating unity among us, so that we can create performance.
so that we can make art together. That making good art has this idea of conflict and understanding, and the other thing that we talk about in one of the principles is consequence. That and this I think has a different the lineage of that coming into, in that I would call it accountability as well. That
Mhm.
I'm in consequence with you because I am accountable to you, you are accountable to me, and all seven of us in the cell are accountable to each other
Yes.
for our group accountability to the market, right?
Yes.
That's what we're
Accountability,
talking
of course, as well, is often understood as a hierarchical concept. You are
in that,
accountable
oh,
to a
I'm
manager,
accountable to them.
to the
Yeah.
OKR manager, or whatever other creepy concept you might have. So yeah,
What
all these
and
terms.
they're going to hold me accountable. I'm being held accountable to someone else's standard that they set for me.
Yes, so there's a lot of abuse going on about most of these words, of course. But okay, we have tried to clarify. Yes, and yeah, just one more thing about self-organization. So I think self-organization is essential. We have talk of coherent self-organization.
Yeah.
It must be coherently. An organization must be coherently self-organized, which is the opposite of
Incoherent.
external steering or hierarchical steering. Yes.
So so where do you make that connection between coherence and steering?
No, no.
What?
Coherent self-organization. Great point. Okay. Coherent self-organization in beta, it should indicate that the whole organization should, by principle, have self-organized teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, self-organized teams and not self-organized individuals. Everybody for themselves.
Yeah.
Individual.
So I'm managing myself. I only care about me. I'm going to do what I
Exactly.
want to do, regardless
That's
of
not
who
the
cares.
self-organization we're
Fuck
talking
you.
about in beta. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about team-based self-organization, so to
Yeah.
say, or team structured self-organization, or whatever we want to call it. Socially dense self-organization, in a way, right?
And yeah, and another part of that social density, why it's so important to self-organization, is that if I have a deep level of mastery in one domain, you
Yes.
have a deep level of mastery in another domain, this person has a deep level of mastery in another domain, then we are capable of having that kind of conversation that makes sense, that says, okay, this is what really needs. If we are going to be truly autonomous, we are going to self-organize together, then we have to get our shit together. And I have to trust that you've got your shit together, and you trust me that I do. And under those conditions, we can be adults together. Imagine that, people having
Yeah.
adult conversations together. That is a precondition, I believe, for self-organization,
Yeah. Sure.
to
Sure.
have your shit
Uh,
together, and to
The
hold
idea
each other in consequence.
of social density is that of ensemble, of the ensemble, right?
Yes.
Performing with each other. Yes.
Yeah.
And not that of isolation. Yeah, you put that well at the beginning. Yeah.
So this and how many times have we talked about this? I would imagine that when someone comes into conversation about the topic of self-organization, says self-organization doesn't work. Self-organization means people doing whatever they want. I've never seen it work. When companies try to do self-organization, people just want to be told what to do, and who better
Yeah.
to tell them what to do than me? Right. So that
When somebody tells
I
me I have never seen self-organization work, I would like to respond, I do not envy you. You are a poor soul. You are a lost soul. I'm sorry. But what else can we say? Because
you
that
have to,
self-organization doesn't work is like saying democracy doesn't work,
and to give up on it.
And that
And I
we
think,
shouldn't even try.
yeah,
Which
and that,
is ridiculous, right?
and that's the thing. I've kind of had it with trying to convince pigs, to try and to get dirty with the pigs about that. Have you heard that metaphor before? That don't try and argue with the pig because you'll get dirty and the pig will just be happy. Something like that.
I
You'll get
don't get that. What?
what and it, I'm totally screwing up the idea now, but that in other words, that if someone is playing in this kind of place where you don't want you're playing in the mud, right? You're a
Mhm.
person playing in the mud, getting dirty. I don't want to get dirty, so I'm not going to go play in that mud with you. If that mud is talking about alpha and how alpha is just the way, we have to accept it. I don't want to clean off my body and talk with you about self-organization and what that might make possible.
Okay.
So why would I dive into the mud and argue with someone else about self-work to try and convince someone else about self-organization if they have this belief, right? And
Yes. It all goes back to theory X, thinking and to looking down on others. And yes, yeah, I just had this. Yesterday, I think somebody shared an article with me that argued that self organization didn't work at a certain organization. And so it's just despicable. I mean,
well, yeah, and that's
that,
confirming your priors. That's using a case study to say I'm right. That's arguing
and
from
I was
authority.
always right because I always doubted that it would be possible here. And now I have the proof because it turned out not to work.
Yeah,
Okay,
and now
maybe I might have induced the failure into all. So that was a kind of self-righteous bullshit article. Yes, you're right.
well, and that's why I can be no penguin now. I can be no because I
Yes,
have a case study on
I
my
mean
half.
that's why all, and we discussed this a couple of times already. That's why it's so important to start with the assumption that everybody wants beta and that everybody deserves beta. Everybody deserves self-organization. Everybody deserves socially dense, coherent self-organization. Everybody deserves decentralization and organizational democracy. Everybody is in every human
Capable.
being is capable of that and would rejoice. We only have to create the conditions so that this can unfold, right? And also do not expect people, those people we are talking about, to show that kind of self-organization, open willingness and capability in command and control organizations or prisons. Don't expect that. So you first have to create the conditions so that people can show their theory why behavior fully at work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this, it should be obvious. By the way, in that article that somebody shared, that not pessimistic is not the right word in this
Cynical, maybe.
cynical article that was shared with me yesterday by a colleague. Somebody also said this kind of change, of course, takes years.
I may have seen the same article. I'm like,
Yeah, maybe that guy shared it with you as well. Okay.
it's like it's going to take 20 or 30 years for that. And
That wasn't in that article, I think, but it's a classic, right? Oh, it will take decades. That's something that Gary Hebel goes on and on and on repeating. It will take years, or maybe decades. No, 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 no. Democracy doesn't take years to bring about either. Or a regime change can be very fast, and creating a democracy can be very fast. We know that for a fact from history. So why wouldn't self-organization work in a company, regardless of size, 20 people or 20,000 or 200,000 people? It must be brought about fast because otherwise it won't be coherent. You cannot say that we will have social density, but in 5 years.
there's no
We will
urgency.
reduce the weight of bosses and hierarchy in 3 years. We can start. Well, first let's talk about it a little bit. Let's have consent
Yeah.
about it first. No, it doesn't work like that.
And the other thing is that I think this is a distinction too about sponsorship and managing the future of the business. I think that creating the conditions for a beta future to happen, that some folks say in alpha in that world is it's the leaderships, the apostrophe s leadership has the responsibility for creating the conditions for self-organization to happen,
Yes.
and it can happen within our structure, and we can still be on top and controlling that. But sponsorship is different from top managers. So,
Yeah.
and the that act is different. So, oh, well, you're saying that someone with money and power has to want this to happen. Well, isn't that the leadership? Isn't that the management? I would say that's the distinction between sponsorship. Sponsorship, and please disagree with me so we can disagree about something. But sponsorship is I want this, I believe in it, I am taking responsibility for this to
Ah,
happen.
yes. Now I get where you are heading at. Okay,
Yeah.
yes,
So
yes, yes,
so
yes, yes. Yes.
so does that ring? That's the way I understand it, and that's I am not trying to impose something on you. I am taking responsibility for this, and I am going to use the influence and power that I have in this alpha organization to state a direction and do what I can do to help make a beta organization happen.
Yes. Yes. The way we talk about the sponsor in Open Space Beta is exactly that. It requires commitment by the sponsor. Yeah, to say I really want beta, and I will make it happen together with you. And secondly, I invite you all to do it together with me. I authorize you. That's the definition of sponsor, as we call it. Yeah, we avoid the term leadership in most of our work a little bit to not provoke confusion.
Well, I think also this idea of just because I'm the sponsor of this thing, I'm not steering this. So how do you that maybe this is the idea of if you're talking with a top manager, senior executive, a CEO of an organization, that okay, that this is something that now you've heard about a beta organization, you believe this is possible, you want this to happen because you care about the people and the customers. And yes, it is important for you to sponsor this, to say this is the signal I'm sending because you respect me as this authority figure. But there's a difference between this. I am not steering this ship. I am with you, for you, building the ship together, right? So, and that I think is other in a traditional change mode, is that okay? Here's the culture I want to create, a culture of problem solving. Now follow me into this culture of problem solving. I'm going to spearhead this, and I'm going to bring you all along, which is different. That's this authoritarian, I guess, way of doing it, versus the sponsorship of doing it together. So
Yeah, well put. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
great. I didn't say anything stupid to disagree.
No,
I
no, no,
gotta
no,
say
no, no,
something. I
no,
have
no.
to say something dumb to you.
No. It's you frame things differently sometimes, and I have to wrap my head around it. But yeah, no, it's accurate, I think. And
Do you have a
the
storm going on there?
again, the in what do you mean?
There was something I heard in the background. I don't know if
Oh,
it's
okay, maybe it's me fiddling with my cell phone here. In a way, what you just talked about beta transformation, right, with open space
yeah.
beta approach and the concept of a sponsor and invitation and so on, and also all those concepts are related to the topic of social density. I mean, why do we do open space? Why do we use open space in the transformation process? Twice, because open space is fantastic to bring social density into the room. The magic of open space, I think, is one of social density. That's why we argue, for example, to never make open space, never do it in a hotel in different rooms. Every session in a room. We always do it in a way that it's in a plain single space.
Yeah.
Ideally, if the group size allows it. So we do it in large plain
150.
environments
Yeah.
without separate rooms or doors in between, so that you might be in one part of the location in a session, but you can still see people at the other side, being in another session, or you can see people moving around. All that creates social density. It's not to be underestimated. Social density is very important, to see other people working. That's why home office work is not so great, because it erodes social density. We don't see the others doing stuff, being there, involved, getting involved, having trouble, doing their work, receiving a call, calling, meeting somebody. That's why having an office in principle should be a good thing to create social density.
Yeah.
Of
And
course, you shouldn't be
you would think
monitoring.
you want to go. You would if
Bosses
you
shouldn't be monitoring their underlings. That is not social pressure. That's
mm,
micromanagement. Yeah,
well, that's a managerial pressure.
that's hierarchical pressure. Exactly. So that's
Yeah.
not the thing we are talking about. Social pressure means working for a client, external, uh, in the flow of value creation, so to speak, and to have the social density in the group doing the work, in the team doing the work. So not
Yeah. Well,
not towards bosses.
and the the words that came to mind also are that there's creative tension, that there's
Mm.
tension here because um, there's there's a need to go somewhere,
Yes.
and there's energy, there's uh, yes, some would say, there's inertia, that if there's no energy in the room, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't care. Whatever. Who cares? Just tell me what to do. I'll do it, and I'll go home and drink a beer or whatever. As opposed to, hey, this is something that I see should happen, and it's okay. According to me, that should happen. And if you disagree, let's talk about it. So there's the tension, and the tension creates the density, and then that it bonds us. That you and I have a social bond, and that we have a social bond in this group of seven because we have had a conversation. We've come to some understanding and an agreement. And maybe we're not always going to agree, but because we are here, we are accountable to each other, and we care that that density happens. We can organize ourselves. Thank you very much. So
By the way, today I talked about with a client about this something related to this.
mhm.
That client he, he mentioned that they have a plant and they produce to
Mm.
stock too. They produce the product and then put it into their inventory.
Yeah,
So they have,
the batch, and yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
batch processing, probably. Yes, 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 yes. And then they put stuff into inventory and it sits there and then it gets sold. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is totally toxic for social density. If you want to have social density, you need also to have the team face the client order, so to speak. Yeah. So if you
Mhm.
have an order of 50 whatever equipments coming in, the team should see it and know, okay, now we have in 3 days we have to fabricate that, build the stuff and dispatch it to that client 72 hours or whatever after the client's order came in. That also creates social density. The consciousness of who is the client, who is going to use our product. That is also something that intensifies social density. Producing to stock, to inventory, erodes that, the sexiness, the appeals, the beauty and the appeal of value creation, because your value creation becomes anonymous, or to an anonymous receiver. So
Yeah.
yeah, if we want to give people back the sensuality of value creation, perception of value creation, then
Yeah.
we have to give them back their clients and the client's order, as Toyota does it,
Mhm.
right? Client
Yeah,
order comes in,
I was
yeah,
just gonna say that. So that's the just-in-time production. I was gonna say, well, this is where theory kind of comes in. This is Deming, and this
this
is
is
Toyota.
Deming, true.
This
Yes,
is also okay. So I'm not gonna just pre-packaged stuff and hope that there's a need for it.
exactly.
I'm going to be, and this is all why all the principles come together. I'm going to be present. Okay, so this is a need. Okay, now I'm going to be transparent. Go here. We're going to have flow intelligence to value creation, and we're going to have the resource allocations are going to come from that value, and we're going to decide on it because of mastery, because we're self-organized. All of these things. You go on the Beta Codex clock in the book, our the yellow book, the 12
Mhm.
principles of the Beta Codex. You
Mhm.
can connect these principles together when you talk about just in rhythm. You're talking about this is us being in rhythm with the client, being in rhythm with them, and
Yes.
and 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 not being beholden to some budgetary, circle jerk.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, if you have the opposite of building product and producing on demand, then you produce to plan, right? So you end up producing for planners or for hierarchy and so on, and that's not what works. What works is to make teams aware that there is an external client, there is an order, that they will charge for the product that's delivered and so on. And you can only have this if teams see the order and produce to order instead of producing to plan, to stock. Yeah.
So this also leads me into another conversation about now we're talking about the social density within the cell and the way the cell responds to the market and then makes requests and
And in
around.
organizations as a whole, right? Social density in teams and beyond in organizations.
That's what I was going to get at. There's within the cell and between the cells.
Yes.
That's a big part of it, and that so not every cell is a peripheral cell, right? And maybe this is a challenge that I need some clarity on, but there are cells in the flesh of the peach as opposed to the skin of the peach. That there's coordination. I mean, this is me thinking about it. There's value coordination.
We just have to correct something. You said the periphery is in the skin of the peach.
That's there's the
Flesh.
core.
I'd like to say that the periphery is the flesh of the peach and the center is the pit. And the skin is the sphere of activity.
Okay, well that's
Yeah.
then.
But okay,
Yeah,
yes. You were talking
but
about
there's
yeah.
but there's
Yes.
there's more than one. That there's okay. The sphere of activity here is at the skin.
Yes.
And then we've got folks in the flesh.
That's the periphery, exactly.
And the periphery. But there's in conceptually, there are likely to be more than one cell coordinating with each other to request resources of the center or resources of each other. That's that conceptually that if you devolve an organizational authority structure, that's what that tells me. So based on what you've seen, how does that in the core tenets of cell structure design, how does that make sense?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I got it. You mean what happens if several cells want to buy something from the center?
Well,
periphery cells.
No. Well, cells who is every cell.
Yes.
Is every cell on the periphery facing a customer outside the sphere of activity?
Yes.
I think that's okay. So that means that means the periphery is one cell thick. Okay. So all right. So then there's the seam agreements between the cells that we're talking about. So that then I think there's coordination among the cells at the periphery to meet each market need, right? Yes.
Yes, cells in the periphery, for example, there in the graphic behind your head, in the wall behind you, there are maybe 15 or 16 periphery cells, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And between them, there are no connections in the design. There are no connections, no lines between them. That's because they do not create value for the other. One periphery cell does not create value for the other. But they can talk with each other. They can create agreements around client projects or whatever, or delivery of larger orders or whatever it is. Yeah. So they can make agreements, yes, but they cannot work for each other. You know, they cannot hire each other in a way. They can make agreements, they can share the work and so on, but the value creation doesn't flow from one periphery cell to another. No, it flows always from one periphery cell to the client.
Okay.
They can bundle forces, join forces, and three periphery cells can do a project or a delivery for a client. That's possible. And so share the income, share the cost, and so on. All that is possible.
This is the social density aspect of it. This is cells being socially dense with each other, making agreements to fulfill a client need.
That's one way, yes, in which clusters or groups of cells can be socially dense. Yeah.
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 So what would be some other examples of social density outside the cell?
For example, to do a knowledge conference once in a while. If you have a company of several hundred people, all the cells run their individual businesses, so that's so far so good. But from time to time, you want to solve problems, think about the future collectively. So you do a knowledge conference, maybe an open space format, and that will create social density beyond the team or the cell level. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. Or, for example, if you want to have innovation, the periphery has to join forces and pay for innovation, which will then become
Well,
center. And that requires communication, agreement, building, and so on as well.
the request for funding, right? So the funding to meet
Sure.
an unarticulated market need requires funding from the center. That's when we talk
From
about
the
value
funding
creation from
or the center
the
by the periphery. Yes.
well. So when we talk about value innovation from the inside out, right? So there's steering from the outside in from market force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're totally going way past social density, I think, but
It's one of these highly interconnected topics. So yeah, we cannot just talk about social density. We must talk about several aspects and elements of the model. Yeah. It's a meta concepts. Yes.
And this is so where's the tension, right? Where is the tension created? So there's a market need that's articulated. There's an existing market that a
The
cell
demand.
is serving, right? Market demand. The cell is meeting market demand, and each of the peripheral cells meeting their own market demand and coordinating as needed to meet a huge market demand. And then we're talking about just what you talked about. And then there's a new product need. Okay, so there's some idea, somebody in one of the peripheral cells, likely anywhere, right? Anyway,
Yes.
one of those people that handles complexity, right? A person with an idea, right? That okay, I need this cell. I don't have revenue for it yet. Right? I don't have revenue for it yet. I need revenue. Well, either A, what happens in the standard organization, I'm raising funding as a startup to pre-sell. I'm going to pre-sell this stuff. That's one thing. Or I ask, this is where I would think of doing it in a beta organization. I'm making a request, an agreement with the center to seek funding for my value creation effort. Does that make sense?
I think it's a little different. I would say that let's assume that somebody in the periphery has this idea. Then the first thing would be to investigate, to start working on it, and that requires time or money or both. Yes, but probably both. So where does the money come from? The periphery has to chip in. So the money for doing innovation
new product development
in beta, in a cell structure design, innovation always is done by the center. Could be the same people who are also working in the periphery. Yeah, so this doesn't mean different people in the headquarters or something like that. Doesn't mean that at all. It means just that innovation is carried out by the center because the external client doesn't yet pay for the stuff, right? Okay. And where does the financing come from? It necessarily comes from the periphery where profit is generated, right? That is a somewhat abstract concept of cell structure design. Of course, we're talking about something conceptual. Yes, that's a little to wrap your head around. But so if you want to have innovation occurs in the center and is financed by the periphery. So you need some agreement of freeing those resources within the periphery so that the center can then do it, is authorized to do it. Yeah. And to put it differently, authorization in beta, in decentralization, authorization to innovate comes from the periphery, not the center.
And then this also feeds it again. There has to be social density to create agreements among the cells, whether in the center or the periphery, to say this is important. I care about this creation of value because, and making a request of peripheral funding, right? I think that's what we're talking about. Peripheral funding back to the center to make that happen. That's what that sounds like to me from there. So this is a logical center versus and I think we're talking about, and this is a whole other topic I think is interesting, about the
Mhm.
dynamic creation of cells. That people aren't, they don't belong to one cell forever, right? That people can serve in multiple cells, and whether they are peripheral or in the center. But again, that's another
Yes.
topic. So
Yes, they can. Yeah, yeah, that's a. But I think my main addition to what you just said would be social density is created through interaction, right?
yeah.
We know that it's required, but there are some factors that enable social density, or strengthen it, or provoke it, like transparency, small
Mm-hmm.
team sizes, joint team measures, relative targets instead of individual targets. We discussed about this a couple of
Mm-hmm.
episodes back. So there are certain characteristics in the BetaCodex, in beta concepts, that are conducive to social density. Is that
Conducive,
the
yeah.
right word?
Conducive, yeah.
Conducive. Yes, they are conducive to social density, to consistent self-organization, and so on, and to peer pressure in a positive sense.
Mm-hmm.
And others aren't, and of course you have to fight against the others, like individual targets, individual incentives, lack of transparency. You have to fight them. Or today I heard about.
Devolve the bullshit.
Yeah, yeah,
You
and
have
you
to show
cannot have
dissent.
departments, large groups of people being responsible to nobody except the boss. That wouldn't be conducive to social.
Well, this also, and I'm looking at the title of our episode because I realize we're talking about high performance as well. We haven't really talked about performance yet. I can't believe we haven't talked about that. And this gets down into, and I'm again, as I occasionally read through the stuff on my wall, the oh, have I do I talk about relative targets enough? I don't, and I do. I realize that because we're talking about, well, what is it when you're socially dense, that you have a commitment to each other,
Yes,
and but not as individuals necessarily. I mean, you have individual needs, sure, of course, to grow your own mastery, to get better at your instrument,
sure.
and that kind of stuff. And then there's also, okay, how do I know I'm doing well? How do I what how where's there's some kind of, there's measurement of performance. And so, okay, so there's the idea of the actual versus actual performance, to know that I did this according to a benchmark, and I'm comparing myself to the benchmark of, hey, my last album sold 2 million copies. Well, is this, how many copies is this one selling, right? And so how do I increase my performance, our performance as an ensemble, to create more, right? So I mean, and the idea of high performance, if I don't give a shit about whatever because I've got mine, I'm living in my mansion somewhere, big deal. So you can do whatever you want, you write all the tunes, whatever, and I don't care. But when you have people who care together, working together with each other, for each other, making something that matters, then that's when high performance happens. This is when I show the Brecker Brothers video, right? Those 6 dudes on stage playing this tune as fast as can possibly play it. And that's people who have social density, who respect each other, and they're constantly raising their game versus their own standard. And it's not about, Mike Stern having the best solo, or Randy Brecker, or whatever. It's about how are we doing together, which, then there's the high performance aspect of it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think performance happens in the space between people, and it's not something that people individually do. We talked about that a few episodes
mhm.
back. So yes, social density is again uh, needed to to produce high performance, right?
Well,
It
the
is.
space between, and we're talking about this, that's what lives in the space between people, right? I mean, that there's the social density, there's the tension, there's the agreement, disagreement.
Yes.
There's the dance. There's, hey, you played a clam. Go shed. Go learn the tune. Go back to the woodshed. But yeah, the social density, because there's the accountability, the consequence. It that's the magic. That's the red. That's the magic of the red. You know.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that alpha organizations, command and control organizations usually lack. They lack social density. They have to increase it, improve it, get more of it, and abandon patterns that erode social density. So that's what also organizational hygiene is about.
Which that I think that's another interesting topic. Organizational hygiene.
Yeah.
There are a lot of interesting metaphors. Are you going to wash with a Brillo pad, or are you just going to kind of sprinkle water on yourself to try and get your hygiene?
Good. Yes.
There is something. Yeah, we're there. The last thing.
Mhm.
We talked about that the high performance lives. It's in the space between people. It happens. When you're in the music, you're in flow together with all this stuff. I mean, that talk about it forever. But then there's this stuff that, around here we have a culture of high performance. We are going to create a culture of high performance. We are going to be intentional to create this culture of high performance. And how are we going to do that? We're going to measure people. We're going to manage them to death, and we're going to do that. And that planning and measurement is going to be how we do the performance. We're going to set targets. We're going to set fixed targets up here. There are these
Yes.
BHAGs, that the big, hairy, audacious goals, and we're going to plan our asses off to get to them. And that's what it's sometimes that, no, just say no. Just say no to do that. Just say no and
Yes.
prepare. That the culture happens again. Another episode, right? Culture is the shadow of the system,
Yeah.
and the system of high performance. If that's a beta system, it is about people being with each other, for each other, in social density. Yeah. So,
Great
damn
final
it,
words. Great
very
last.
very few no disagreements today. Damn it. Um,
That's
Final
okay.
words. I love this stuff. I love to talk about it, and I think it's because it makes so much sense artistically and musically. It's very easy to make those connections for me. And watch my YouTube or whatever channel for an event I'll be hosting. God only knows. Hopefully next week or so.
Okay.
And
Very
we'll
good.
talk about that. So that's my story. What final words would you like to share with the Betaverse today?
I'm delighted that we talked about social density. Let us know what you, dear listeners, or people who watch this, think about this episode. We will be happy to hear from you. Yeah.
Yes, well, I will restream it out here, and it's probably another 5-10 minutes, and let folks chew on it.
Good.
Those of who may not have seen it. So, all right, my friend, we will end the live stream now and sign off. And good now and good then.